Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace.
Well, and we were on track to mend a lot of fences that had been broken in '83 during that time period.
And because I always thought Mark was a better driver than me anyway. But that was just there. You did.
Well, so did he. Say what you do.
So did he.
Oh, I did too.
Well, ain't often I agree with Ritchie. Well, I actually worked for Eddie's Garage, Eddie Museum, and Richard Petty. I mowed the yards, whatever they need me to do. I've been doing this for about 7 years, but it's been good for me because it, through all the years of if there was any turmoil or whatever, well, it's allowed me to get to know Richard and his family again.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Waid.
And my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace, and a track that truly does care about NASCAR history. Before we get started this week, I wanted to give a little update on our friend and yours, Tony Liberati. Rambo had triple bypass surgery a couple of weeks ago. He's back home and in rare form, maybe just maybe fighting a little bit of cabin fever. So what better way to give an update on Rambo than to have Rambo do it himself? Are you there, sir?
I am here. How you doing, Rick? Steve?
Hey, did you get that Zoom thing figured out? Are you okay on it now?
Yeah. Well, I don't get to work at the Space Center and do stuff like that like you do. I ain't one of them rocket surgeons.
Rocket surgeon?
Yeah.
So, Tony, we did text back and forth yesterday, and I just wanted to make sure that I had understood you correctly. You just had major surgery a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you call major. I mean, they didn't hack a leg off or nothing, but they did take my heart out and set it on a table and update a few things and set it back in there.
If you open the door that wide, I got to walk in. They were able to find a heart.
Oh man,
son, you walked right into that one, bub.
I thought because I was, down a little bit that I might get a little leeway, but I see where you're at. We'll start throwing them rocks.
Absolutely not. Now, again, I do want to confirm and make sure that I understood you correctly. You had this major surgery just a couple of weeks ago. Did you actually drive to go get your lovely wife, Yvette, some dinner? Is that what I heard you say?
Well, let me just explain that, yes, I did have surgery. It was a double bypass, not a triple. When they got in there, they figured it out, and it was a double. And don't
let the facts get in the way of a good story. That's what you've told me for 20 years now.
Yeah, exactly. That's you. But anyway, my wife has been a real trooper, and she is definitely been drugged through the ringer over this deal. And we were just sitting here, and she said that she wanted some pizza from Pizza Hut. I said, order it. I'll go get it. She said, you can't go get it. I said, watch me. So I hopped in the car and drove to Moxville, we live about 9 miles out of Moxville, almost Yadkinville. So, and the only time I really heard it was turning into Pizza Hut because I actually had to turn the wheel because most of it was pretty straight. But when I went in, turned into Pizza Hut, I got a little pulling in my chest there, and I said, okay, let's don't do that again. But yeah, I went and got her some pizza.
I'm assuming that was completely and without reservation against doctor's orders.
Yeah, well, that's what she said too, but I have yet to have a state trooper pull me over and ask me if a doctor said I could drive or not. So, I mean, does anybody have a state trooper pull them over and say, hey, did your doctor say you could drive?
You know what?
Now, in my defense, I am 100% dead set against painkillers. I hate them. I don't want them. I don't want to have nothing to do with them. And I had been off of the painkillers for at least 3 days before I drove. So in my defense, I wasn't looped up on painkillers driving around Boxville.
Rambo, why does it not surprise me that you are firmly in the camp of it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is permission? Why does that not surprise me?
I live by that motto. What, are you kidding me?
I guess we should feel fortunate that you didn't ride your bleeping bike.
Yeah. Well, I think after when you and I went to the Petty's deal up there for their Christmas party, and I showed up with a car instead of the bike, and you were so relieved, I figured I'd just go ahead and leave the bike parked for a while.
No, I was not going to ride on the back of your bike to anywhere, much less Petty Enterprises. Tony, in all seriousness, just for a second, how are you feeling?
I am. I'm feeling 100% better than I did. I'm not going to lie. That shit hurt.
Yes.
I mean, they broke me in half. I guess, I don't know, and I couldn't get comfortable in the hospital. The 5 days or whatever I had to stay in there, I was miserable. I was 100% miserable. And then I come home and then had my wife taking care of me, which was a whole lot better, more comfortable, but just miserable. And up to about, I'd say about Monday or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday this week, I feel like I'm alive again.
Yeah.
I feel like that I can move around without being just real timid about moving around. I mean, since the day that I got home, I was walking out to the road and back because doctor said, you need to keep walking, and I'm not somebody that wants to, sit around. I mean, Rick, in 2019 I competed in a physique competition, and I know that was 2019, but I was working out like a crazy man. And to have something like this jump up on me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was a little bit more surprised than I was scared of it. I just, I was like, what are you kidding me? You know what I mean? It's like, it really blindsided me.
Well, what is the prognosis? How does it look from here on out?
I have to go see my surgeon for post-op on Tuesday and see what he says. I did blood work and EKG and x-rays on Friday. All that come back pretty good. Everything, nothing wrong. So I guess that's good. Tuesday, I go to post-op, and I'm just going to see what he says. Either I'm going to be sitting on a couch Wednesday morning, or I'm going to be in the race shop, one or two.
Now, from what I understand, several people from the NASCAR community have reached out to you to see how you're doing. Who are some of the people that you've heard from?
I'm going to tell you, I was overwhelmed. My wife we got together after I quit traveling and I was knee deep in the racing, where I was just staying at the track and go every now and then, and she didn't have to go. So she pretty much knows nothing about it. And her phone exploded.
Yeah.
And I've heard from Jeff Burton, Jimmy Johnson, Frankie Stoddard, guys that I've worked with, just say, hey, hope you're doing okay. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't believe all the messages, and my wife was fielding all the messages. So for the people that did message me, I was a little bit too loopy to text back, but I've been going through it and texting back. But I was really, really surprised at all the people that took the time to send me wishes on the phone. I mean, it was crazy. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing.
Okay. All right. So that's cool. You hear from all these people, but of all the people that you knew in NASCAR once upon a time, who's the one person, who's the one good friend of yours who actually came to the hospital to check things out and make sure that you were okay? Who was that one person?
That was my tool man. My tool man heard about it. The Mac Tools guys, Brian, and he showed up at the hospital. I'm kidding, Rick. My goodness, your face about fell off. No, I will have to say that that I was laying in the hospital bed with the gown with my butt hanging out, and who shows up?
Yep.
Go Rick Houston.
Yeah.
Rick, he was just trying to get a story or something.
No, man. I wanted to see you laid up and, give me a chance to say some of the things I wanted to say all these years and you not be able to do anything about it. That was my one chance. But
I do appreciate that. And Brian, the Mac Tools band, did show up. And then my neighbor, who's also a preacher, he showed up. But it was so quick. I mean, I went in for just a checkup, and the next day I was in surgery. So it was really come on quick.
Guys who start getting up into our age range, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Well, just like I told you, 2019, I competed in a physique contest, and I was working out in shape. I slowed down on the working out here lately just because running the farm and doing all that. But man, you gotta get that stuff checked. Even though you think that you're healthy and you feel good, and I go to work all day, come home, work till whatever, go to bed, get up and do it, and I was doing it. I laughed at me and Carl Long and Gary Showalter standing around, and I'm like, I said, I got to go do this test. I said, I hope they find something, because it's either that or I'm just getting too old to work in this shop, because I get wore out. So, I had little things, I was just tired and had a little pain in my neck, and every now and then I just get to feeling just weird. So I told wife, and we just went and was going to have a heart cath, is what they called it. And they stick it up in there, and if you're a little bit blocked, they give you a stent. But I was there 15 minutes. They come back and said, "You're going to surgery."
Wow. And
my father had the same surgery on the same arteries, and he was 4 years older than me. And doctor said it was pretty hereditary. So I would say, when you're getting up in that age, you got to go. I mean, you got to go get checked. I had a long conversation with Carl Long yesterday about it. But you gotta get checked, because they flat told me, they said you were on thin ice, and they said if you did the wrong thing and wasn't caught in time, you was done. It was it. And a lot of people wait to till they have the heart attack. That's what my dad did. My dad waited. He had a heart attack. They caught it. They caught him right when he was having a heart attack, and he did the bypass, and he was fine. So you just got to be careful. And I'm gonna have to say that I'm no longer 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I got showed that real quick.
Well, Tony, in all seriousness, I know we kid and laugh a lot, but I am glad that you're okay. I'm glad that you're back on the road to being mended. Thank you for joining us. And I will just give you one more chance. Do you want to tell our listeners again about how you were in a physique contest just a couple of years ago? You want to get that in one more time before we go?
No. Let me tell you what I want to get in. I want to thank, out of everybody in this that's called me, I want to thank Rick Houston, because Rick Houston come up there, sat down there and talked to me. And of course we laughed and joked about it the night before I was getting my surgery. And he also organized the GoFundMe. And I want to say thanks to everybody that donated to that. I didn't know nothing about it. I don't know how to do it. And Rick handled all that. And from the bottom of my heart, Rick, I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for everything you've done through this. And especially what my wife told me, and how you handled my wife and made sure she was okay. Really appreciate it.
Well said, Rambo. Well said.
Thank you.
All right, man. It's good to see you, man.
All right. I will. Thanks.
Take care, Rambo.
All right. See you.
Well, Steve, I don't even know where to go from there.
I'm going to take to heart what Rambo said about taking care of yourself, because I got you guys about 10 to 15 years.
Steve, this week in the third and final installment of our interview with Ritchie, Mark, and Timmy Petty, they talk about the devastating impact of Adam Petty's accident the growth and subsequent slowdown of the engine program there at Maurice Petty and Associates, and what they're all doing today. Then in our second segment, we're going to go back to the October 22nd, 1981 issue of Grand National Scene. It was a slow news week. I mean, all that happened was Dale Earnhardt signed to drive for Bud Moore after considering an offer from Harry Ranier. Dale has a dream day while out in the woods hunting. David Ifft gets fired by MC Anderson, and the rumor mill is in full swing about where Bobby Allison will wind up in 1982 and a possible two-car team for drivers Tim Richmond and David Pearson.
Wow, you're right, Rick. You're right. Real slow news week there. Nothing going on.
There are features on Buddy Arrington, ESPN doing its first live flag-to-flag broadcast of the upcoming race in Atlanta, and Maurice Petty returning to the track for the first time in a few months. This week, we have new Patreon support from the Dean Abides and Matthew Schaefer. So, Dean and Matthew, thank you. Support like yours helps us to continue this podcast and continuing bringing our listeners the very best interview content possible. If you can, please consider supporting our podcast on a monthly basis. You can do that via patreon.com/the Same Vault Podcast. Or if you would prefer to do a one-time show of support, you can do that via paypal.me/the Same Vault Podcast or venmo.com/the Same Vault Podcast. And also, just as a reminder, this show is not affiliated in any way with American City Business Journal's owner of the same brand. All right, so May 12th, the year 2000, I was actually in New Hampshire, and I know how it affected me personally, professionally and personally. I can't begin to imagine what it was like to be a member of the family. Where were you guys when you heard?
Well, I was in Memphis with the truck team. It was our family truck team. And Travis was there too, right? Mm-hmm. Travis Owens, who so they were pretty close growing up. And anyway, they called us to the trailer. That made us all stop what we were doing, you know. And I think everything stopped, and then we were in Memphis, you know. So and then Fred Wanky, Adam's dead, you know, and we're all, you know, like, what? And then they proceeded to tell us, you know, but he just, before he even got told, he kind of felt it, you know what I mean? It was just like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. That he felt it, what they were going to tell us. Fred Wanky.
Okay.
And anyways, you know, we just lost grandfather not long before that, and you got to realize that everything was sort of hinged on Adam, the future of the way things were going then, and
yeah. But tell about they couldn't get a hold of Kyle, they couldn't get a hold of Richard. They had you start calling, and you had to call down here and get a hold of Martha Jane, to get a hold of Richard. I mean, it was
well, cell phones was kind of new then.
Oh yeah, everybody was.
But yeah, it was just a strange deal. I mean, like you said, you've told your little part of it and all that.
We were here at the shop, and in the back, our back building, that's when Chrysler or Dodge or whatever were renting out to put together the new
Intrepid.
Yeah, the research team, I guess. But anyway, a couple of guys that worked on the truck team before, David Hayhurst and somebody else, they had heard, and they come over here and they was like, what's going on? Did y'all hear? And was like, well, no. And then all of a sudden the phone call started coming, and we just, Mark and me and David and all that, we're just standing there and just stunned. I mean, didn't know what to do. I mean, it was a 9/11 moment for our family. We didn't know what to do.
Yeah, they were asking where the king was, and I didn't know.
But you talk about getting, you know, I'm talking about hitting the wall, getting the air knocked out of you and all that. It was the same kind of feeling. It's kind of like, oh, what just happened?
Well, and it's like Timmy had said, you know, we was excited because we'd went through all these years where, you know, we was all racing and carrying on. Kyle had some success, but Adam was the deal. You know, he was going to be their deal, and it just shocked the whole family, and it was just
well, and we were on track to mend a lot of fences that had been broken in '83. During that time period, it was just,
we'd all come back together. We were doing the engines for the truck program, and we were a major part of it
with Chrysler
and with Richard. And you know, when I say the truck program, it's Richard's team, but and then Adam would run a few races in the truck and all. But just,
well, you know,
Adam,
and he was looking forward to working with us too.
Oh, Adam,
with the engine stuff.
Adam, you know, when he was growing up, he was like the rest of us. He was a little bit of a wilder. But at that time, he had settled down. He was a fine young man. He was respectful to people. He knew where he was going, and he was. I'll just say that
he made a transition and never
looked
was back.
He was focused, and I think he would have made it.
Feel like we all feel like he was going to be good.
Now, did you start running trucks after that, or had you already been running trucks?
No, I had a.
That's kind of where it started.
Yeah, it was. I hadn't. We had raced late models, and I probably hadn't raced since '94 or '95 at that point, and because we went to work doing the engines on the truck deal.
And I had '96 was my last race with Bob Rahilly and Dick Rahilly. They had a deal set up down there at Homestead, and they needed a driver, so I went down there
with the Jim Rosenblum truck.
The Rosenblum truck, and I got to run for them for that race, and that was my last race in '96 at Homestead, and you was the
well, as far as our driving and stuff, we'd already said, okay, well, we're this, you know, or we're aging up, but our focus was
the engines.
We wanted to be a part of the Petty organization,
umbrella.
Yeah.
And Richard allowed us to be a part of the engine program with the truck, so that already, you know, that was our focus, and then I guess that happened with Adam in May. And then what was it? August we went to IRP.
Yeah, it was June. We started. Dad, that's like I said. Dad started putting together that deal to get them that truck to go to IRP, and that was I guess August was IRP.
And it surprised me because I really kind of didn't know nothing about it, and I think it was something Daddy and Richard come up with as far as getting them trucks. And then I just assumed with his experience, Ritchie would drive because all I ever run was late model stock.
Well, when this deal come together, then I just said, look, I had my time. I had my time in the sun. Let's put our efforts towards Mark. And I said, I'm behind him 100%. And because I always thought Mark was a better driver than me anyway. But that was just that. I mean, you did.
Well, so
You
did
didn't
he.
say what you do.
So did he.
I did too.
Well, ain't often I agree with Ritchie. No, but must not either one of us been very good, or we'd have done it for a living.
Well, yeah. But I'm just saying, at that time, I knew we weren't going to make it, two of us trying to do the same thing. So I backed out and I said, I'm 100% behind you, because he had been 100% behind me when we did the 53 and all that. And Timmy is 100% behind us both. So, you know, it was an easy decision.
Not to get ahead of the story.
Easy decision.
It just wasn't meant to be, like Daddy would say.
Yeah.
That's what I say about all of it.
But anyway, we on our
It wasn't because it wasn't good enough.
on our Petty Brothers YouTube, we go in depth on this deal, and we tell the story. And Mark went down there to test at Caraway, and I mean he was busting some good laps down there, and he's like, we're excited about this.
Yeah,
But still unsure.
Yeah.
You know, never even seen IRP. Had
Yeah, and then we went into Daddy, and he'd worked out a deal with Bob Kieslowski to be on call if he couldn't get around. He was going to jump in the truck for us and make the race for us. And like I said, Bob come up to me after the first practice and said, "Hey, he's getting the job done. Don't
Just
back
let him
away.
go."
Yeah, let him go. I'm going back over here to my deal."
Now, how many truck races did you actually?
Well, was going to go run IRP that year, and end up running the rest of that season, right?
So IRP was the only thing on the docket.
Ran 7 or 8 that year, and then I run 1 or 2 for Mike and Tex Powell the very next year. So probably 9 or 10 races.
We went to Chicago, we went to Nashville, we went to Texas.
But it was a deal where it was only approved. You know, I hadn't had no experience.
Yeah.
And so they let me go to IRP because we still had to.
We had late model experience.
But you still had to get
progression to the big tracks.
You had to get permission from NASCAR on what tracks you got to run, and Wayne Alton helped us a lot, and we went through him. But it just happened to be that the schedule worked out where it was that ladder from the size of track as we went.
Yeah.
And then
Where was that track in Chicago? It's not the one
No,
in Joliet.
it's,
one in Cicero. The
Yeah.
flat, remember the flat track?
Yeah.
We ran there.
So funny story about that. So I was on Brendan Gaughan's team in at Childress's for a couple years, and but going back to that, Mark actually made the race, and Brendan missed the race. So we've been friends with them for years.
Well, he had a sponsor, and so,
Napa. It was
and
with
then
Napa.
so he was like, "Hey, could y'all put this on your truck?"
And we said, only if you'll let us use your pit crew, because we didn't have nothing. We didn't, we
Well,
didn't-
and Brendan tells a story. It's the only time he ever went over the wall during a race.
Pit crew
Because I think he was the
on him.
catch can man.
something, yeah.
And he talked about the lug nuts flying and all that, but it gave him a different perspective
as a driver.
as a driver of what the crew members were going through. But yeah, we put their sponsor on the truck
For the pit crew.
Yeah.
because we didn't have a full pit
Well,
crew.
it goes
And I
back.
didn't run with the flip that race.
It goes.
Nah,
It goes
yeah.
back to Daddy, to Lee, to Richard. They always were willing to help people, and that's what they instilled in us. Brendan, at that point, he needed some help because he had a sponsor deal and he had to have it in the race, and we were willing to help. I don't even think we took any money. We just took the pit crew.
Yeah, and a lot of people helped us coming through,
Yeah.
whether it be when we was
Yes.
running Ritchie in the ARC or the Cup, but them ARCA races, a lot of guys would come over and help
Yes.
us do
Oh,
pit
yeah.
stops and stuff, and we were just fortunate that a lot of people helped us out.
We look.
The years 2000, 2001 were not good years in NASCAR. Did all of that safety controversy play into? I mean, was that something that you thought about? I mean, Adam had been hurt.
Yeah,
but-
that, and I was in that race at Texas when we lost Tony Roper.
Yeah,
And
Steve, and
but
him.
I guess maybe
You were in the race?
I was in the race. I
Really?
dodged direct and run through the tri-oval to miss it.
Did you really?
Yeah, because I think Steve and
Yeah.
Derek Cope got together.
Yeah.
And then I put Tony
And
Roper.
if you'll watch that back,
You go down.
well, I'd go down and I hit
up.
the grass and it was slick. It was wet. It was dewy.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of getting sideways, just knocked it out of gear and just rode like a roller.
But-
But no, did I think about that? I mean, I hurt for people and thought about it, but I guess maybe I was ignorant and was, that ain't gonna happen to me.
Right.
Kind of a deal. But I think when everybody really, when everybody was like, "Hey, hang on a minute," was maybe when we lost Earnhardt because he
Yeah.
was like a.
But it goes back to like he
That
was talking
changed a lot
about.
of
He was
people.
talking about '94. That day, that race at Daytona, you lost Neil Bonnet and Rodney Orr
Yeah.
within 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And then that guy in the ARC, I don't know who it was before that. He'd got hurt really bad coming off 2, knocked the wall down, or not coming off 4. He knocked the wall down. So 2000, that was tough on drivers and all that. But NASCAR, that's what we was kind of going through. We were losing people here and there. 2000 was a big deal because you lost so many people. You lost like he said, them 3, Adam and Irwin and Roper, and then you come back and then the Earnhardt deal. That's when
different
people.
divisions.
That's
Yeah.
when everybody
Freedom.
started taking a look at it.
But back to the question, I don't think I ever thought about it because I thought maybe I was just cocky enough thinking it ain't gonna happen to
Yeah.
me. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, now at this age, it'd worry me to death.
Yeah.
It really
Well, no,
would.
it would.
I mean, it
Well,
would.
that's
Yeah.
the '94 deal. I'm sitting on pit road, waiting to go practice. You know how it is when it's a restrictor plate and you're waiting for somebody to send you out to get an open. I'm sitting in there, and they just said, "Get ready," because they're gonna tell you when to go, and you go to get a hole. And then about time Timmy's like, "Say, get ready," and then red flag, and then they shut down practice. And like we was like, "Oh, whatever." They pushed us back in there, and then it started coming in there. And Neil Bonnet was dead. Holy cow! That took the wind out of the whole garage
Yeah.
because that wasn't a rookie that got killed. That was a dang veteran.
Yeah.
and a friend there.
Oh well, and
Yeah,
it was
veteran
a.
friend.
I remember you talking about the Winston Cup scene there. Deb Williams coming up, and she was in tears. She was upset really bad.
Everybody at that track was it?
Yeah, I mean
All the days.
everybody was,
Everyone that was
and
in
it
it.
was. But that was a weird feeling that week because everybody was on edge. Was running Hoosier tires and Goodyears, and everybody knew what to do. But it's the same thing Mark was going through in 2000 after losing them people. Yeah, you don't. Okay, that was them, it ain't gonna happen to me. But when it happened to Earnhardt, when it happened to Bonnet, when you're a young guy, you're thinking, oh, that could happen to me.
Yeah. So 2008, the doors closed.
Ours didn't. We're still down here.
Yeah, but yeah.
Okay then.
No, I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
They pulled out of here and went to Charlotte, and that was a weird deal too, because since 1952, somebody's been a race team here in Level Cross.
We can't go straight into that, Rick.
Yeah, that ain't our
You're
deal.
jumping a lot of years right
Yeah,
there.
that ain't our
Okay. All right.
All I'm saying is, we were down here. Kind of after that, we went through the Carlos Contreras years with the trucks, and we were all involved with that. And things were rolling here good. This was a complete engine shop. We had R&D going with Chrysler and all kinds of stuff. We had picked up the momentum again. Mm-hmm. I would put it in those terms. All right, so you do all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, the fruit starts drying up. I don't know if it was because of economic, the world or whatever, but we started feeling the pressure 2005, 6, and earlier than that. And then actually the 2008, I guess that's when the economy really took a crap.
Yeah, but for us personally, we'd been doing the truck engines for Richard's team.
Now was the engine shop here?
Yes.
Was that a separate company from Petty Enterprise?
Yes.
We were Maurice Petty and Associates.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so
Okay.
The trucks were actually done in Thomasville.
yep. So we worked, and we worked Richard for Petty Enterprises to build the engines for so many years, and then the last couple of years we were actually a vendor from Dodge, and then Dodge provided him the engines, but we worked hand in hand with Ted Flack and John Worley, Joey Arrington. We was a part
It
of
was
that.
a pretty good
umbrella.
group to be in.
So we were lucky and fortunate to be a part of that umbrella.
Well, you just did that episode with Robert Presley. Yeah. We had an engine in his car.
Well, and that's what
Harris.
come of that. We'd lost it. There wasn't really a deal for us, and we still had engines here that belonged to Dodge. And then Ted Flack called us about 2 weeks before the truck race at Daytona and wanted to know if we had such and such engine ready, or if it was still sitting here. And what had happened is we went to Homestead with it that last race of 03. And that man from driving school's son was driving. Anyways, didn't make the race with it. But then Ted wanted the motor to provide to Jim Harris and Harris Trucking for Robert to run. And so we took that motor and put it in the car or in the truck. Ran real good that week. That was when he was leading, coming off 4, and Rick Crawford beat him to the line.
barely beat him.
But, so we had a year or two there. We did engines for Jim Harris Trucking, and Bob Brevac.
Did something for him too.
Different people were driving for
Tina
him.
Gordon was
So
on
we
there.
were trying to make a go of it.
And it was going good, and they even put us on the R&D for the late model stock Dodge program. I mean, so Maurice Petty and Associates was gaining,
when Dodge come back and sponsored the Winston race, the Dodge Racing Series.
Like I said, there's a lot of stuff
We
happening
did a
in
lot of
these
stuff
years
between us and Joey for that.
for us to be on a rebound from the 2001 and earlier.
So, anyways, you're just gonna ask a question about 08.
I forgot what it was.
Well, I can tell you what it was. It was when they moved to
Right.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
But by that time,
Now, did you guys keep on plugging here?
Well,
what had happened is in 05, the end of 05,
that's what I'm leading into,
Yeah.
and I'll be done. I'm done with the story.
No.
So we were out here working on late model stocks and helping a lot of people, which Denny Hamlin was one of them guys. And there's a lot of people involved that we were doing late model stock motors for. You could probably name off more than I can. But my point is, me and Mark and Ritchie was out here one morning, and we looked at each other right square in the eye and said, we got a great side business right here, because we had lost our support from Dodge.
well, we had a good little engine business, but we was trying to feed 4 families off of it.
Well, it's really more than that.
Well, okay, but we were trying to feed a lot of families off of it, and it's they just
And working day and night and not really feeling like you're just progressing.
Yeah.
So you see what I mean? So that's when we reached the crossroads. We said, all right, we got to go out and get a job, and we'll continue this deal here as long as we can. And how many years ago was that? 2006. You left before I did. You went to Bill Davis's, didn't you?
But that was the end of 05.
Yeah, 05. So, okay, 2008. Sorry, I just had to get you up to.
So by that time, Timmy went to work at RCR. I went to work at Bill Davis, and Ritchie was working for Dad, helping Mom and Dad around. So we still did engines and stuff on the side, which turned into what Timmy's business is now, which is Moonshine Speed Shop. So
awesome.
when they did their deal in 08, it didn't really affect us.
No, it was already.
It was ineffective because it was.
It started 2 years earlier.
Everything had separated back, and it wasn't because of people didn't get along separated. It was the times.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it just was.
It's just
what they had to do.
We got our deal, and they got their deal.
All right. So what are you guys doing now? You've got the Moonshine
Speed Shop.
Speed Shop.
But I work. My day job is at ECR Engines, which is Richard Childress's Chevrolet engine company.
Okay.
And I would put him up as one of the best engine shops in the world that I know of. I mean, it's phenomenal what we do there as you know, his company. So I enjoy doing that, and I do old school, any brand restoration, and we do some car stuff here too. So, and one of our goals that we want to do together is we want to replicate Lee's 1954 championship car that he went down there and got out of the dealership and won the race on the beach course. And hopefully we can have that done in a couple of years to go down there for the 70th anniversary. Or
Revealing.
Now, how about you guys? What are you doing now?
Well, I actually work for Petty's Garage, Petty Museum, and Richard Petty. I mow the yards, whatever they need me to do. I've been doing this for about 7 years, but it's been good for me because it, you know, through all the years of if there was any turmoil or whatever, well, it's allowed me to get to know Richard and his family again on a different level. There's, you know, it's not competitive. We're not racing, but they, you know, I work with Rebecca, her and Brian on Petty's Garage, and I work with Richard's daughter, Sharon. She runs the museum, and I get to see Kyle. He's in and out, and I get to see Richard every day, and I get to see Dale a lot. But it allowed me to make peace and just roll forward. And I enjoy listening to some of Richard and Dale's stories now, because it's some of the stories I heard from Dad, and then they repeat the same story, and it's spot on. Yeah. I mean, you know, a lot of the tales through the years they grow as it goes, but everything in them fairy tales is usually about dead on.
Now, what are you doing today?
Well, I took care of Mom and Dad, their stuff and then now they're dead, so I'm trying to figure out my way.
and I also that's my son's Petty Shine.
Okay.
My son Judson, he does a detail business out of the back shop back here, and he and I actually went in together and we bought a little 5-bay car wash down in town. So,
well, we're trying to put together the Petty Brothers Racing YouTube site, and we're doing a little different things. But the three of us and our sister, we ended up with all the pictures and artifacts of grandmothers and mamas and daddies, and so we're trying to figure out if there's a need for them. Right now, we supply things to the Hall of Fame and different things. So I guess I kind of handle that.
Absolutely.
Yes, there's a need for it.
Yeah. So I guess that's where my times took care of, taking pictures and trying to figure this out and all. But
well, we joke about it. That's what kind of started the podcast deal, is we want to tell our kids what everything was.
Yeah.
And we joke, so when they went to throw it in the dumpster, they at least know what they stole away.
So,
or they wouldn't throw it away, you know, because they don't know what it is unless we tell them.
so that's
Well, anything that you're going to throw in the dumpster, just pitch it in that car out there.
We done dug it out of the dumpster once. I now we'll put it back in.
yeah.
All right. Last question. Well, two more questions. What was it like for you guys when your dad was elected to the NASCAR Hall of Fame?
Unbelievable. I mean, really. I mean, think about it.
I think we wanted it more than he did, because we're so proud of him from everything he done, It was
And
a
her
good-
mom, she was even going through a lot of, with her health, and
But that I remember the day when he got called when they inducted him, and I was sitting up at a ball field with my kids, and they called, and I was just tickled to death because yeah, well, just so proud of my dad, and I was just finally that people can recognize what he actually accomplished, because
well,
Well, it couldn't have come probably for our family. Again, God handles everything in a great way, and it couldn't have happened no better because there was he got in May they said he was going to go in,
yep.
and then mother found out she was sick in July, and that was one of her statement was if I can just live to see him go in the Hall of Fame, and she was able to do. God allowed her to do that in January, and then she went home in May.
Yeah.
So it really become even extra special because it was something she wanted.
Yeah.
And them two are the ones.
Yep.
Our mom and dad, no matter what we think we went through with this
Oh, yeah.
whole Petty
Oh,
family
yeah.
deal, our mom and dad were they went through it. It was their hard work, their toils, their efforts, just like Richard, Linda, the whole crowd. We were just lucky enough to be their children.
And I was thankful enough that when grandfather, when he went in, mom and dad got to go experience the all the accolades of traveling around the racetracks and all that. They got to experience all that together. So when dad got the nod, and like he said, mama got sick, she couldn't go and do the things so they got to do it together the first round with Lee Boy. So that was actually nice.
Awesome. Good deal. Last question. How would you like for your dad to be remembered by race fans?
It ain't how that's a good question.
tricky.
Yeah. No, I don't have. Ask that question again. How do I want him to be remembered? Hell, he's already remembered. He's the greatest engine builder, the greatest dad, the greatest everything in my life.
Yeah, well, I mean,
That's how I remember him.
exactly.
I don't know if you can put it all in words in just a few seconds.
But again, we'll go back to the uncomfortable question we were asked earlier about the '83. What I think about the way I want my dad to be remembered is how he handled it.
Yeah. Oh,
How he handled what they threw
I'll
at
say
him.
this about the chief. He had an unbelievable ability to make a call in tough times and stick with it, and 90% of the time it was right. You know what I mean? He had that. Well, he had experience too, but his decisions, and he would tell us, when you make a decision,
Stand by
stick
it.
with it. So that meant you had to make the right decision almost instantly. A lot of times.
That's perfect. That's right.
But how he's remembered is that he went through and he had to struggle as a child with polio. He overcome it, and with his dad and his brother, they were able to build arguably one of the best NASCAR race teams of all time. And then they went through a lot more hardships, but he overcame it. He loved the Lord, and he showed you how to handle
Adversity.
and
Tough
tough
times.
situations. And we're all short-tempered, but in the long run, he might have been short-tempered with things, but in the long run, he handled things the correct way. And just how he took all that on his shoulders in a positive way.
I
mean,
could
that's
say a
how-
lot of things, but I think you just hit it perfect, and I commend you. I enjoyed listening to you.
No,
That's
but it
perfect.
just, I mean,
no, I
and-
mean
and-
that was great.
And
That's
and
perfect.
again, we talk about how bad it was when everybody split up in '83, but really, it seemed bad at the time. But for our family, it was the greatest thing that ever happened because, again, our dad had high blood pressure, and he was a walking stroke, and that calmed him down, and then he was saved, and he was able to get close to the Lord
After that.
After that,
Really?
I'm not. Yeah, I know it was after that.
Yeah.
And it allowed them. It just allowed us to get to know him as a different person for the rest of his life. And that last 35 years, we were very fortunate to get to know him. And like I said, had it worked out like we thought we wanted it to, he might have been gone in '84.
For a
85.
guy that's known for a rough exterior, serious, mean,
Yeah.
our dad was a good person.
He's a
I
family
mean,
man for
and
sure.
like I
He
said,
put up,
it was all, you know.
Oh,
I don't think we will ever know. I don't think we will ever know the sacrifices our dad
That's
made
true.
for us
the whole
Right.
through all that,
All
you know,
he did.
everything that went on or what didn't go on. I think at the end of the day, he was trying to look after us, and we'll never realize the sacrifice he made because of us.
And that we appreciate
And you're
it.
talking about him being a good guy. I know several times people come in here wanting to borrow. Hey, I need some money for groceries, and I'll pay you back. And he'd give them the money. He'd come out there and say, "I'll never see that guy again." But I did the right thing because that's what the good Lord wanted me to do.
And I know there's probably anybody that ever knew him will agree with what I'm about to say, that you might not always like what he had to say, but you always knew where he stood.
Yep.
You wasn't gonna hear nothing that Maurice Petty said behind your back. He was gonna say it.
Yeah. Oh, he definitely.
Yeah.
And you know, in this world that we are in today, there's a lot of that goes on. And
Yeah.
but he was a man. You knew where he stood, for sure.
And he was a.
We appreciate you asking.
He's a real loyal person too. If you did right by him, he'd do right by you. I guess that's how you'd say that.
Yep.
Super.
Taking the checkered flag and driving to victory lane is the goal for any racer. It tells the competition, my accomplishments resulted in a trip to the winner's circle. It's no different as a business owner, team leader, or coach. Recognizing those deserving is what we do every day at 5-Star Awards and Engraving. Hi, race fans. This is Bob Laird, Director of Sales at 5-Star and former jackman for Buddy Arrington back in the 80s. Laser engraved and full-color corporate awards, as well as crystal, plaques, trophies, and promotional products are just some of a sample of what we offer at 5-Star. With state-of-the-art equipment in our North Carolina facility, let our experienced graphic artists take you from idea to concept and ultimately the finish line. To view our beautiful and unique designs, please visit us at 5starawards.net. The entire project can be completed online. Please reach out to me at bob.laird@5starawards.net, 919-954-1130. As a thank you, everyone who contacts me will receive at no charge a collection of NASCAR memorabilia featuring Richard Petty, while supplies last. That's bob.laird@5starawards.net, 919-954-1130.
This segment is brought to our listeners by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace. I have talked many times here on the show about the impact that Adam Petty's accident had, not only on my career, but my life as well. And listen, I am in no way, shape, form, or fashion a part of the Petty family other than being a fan and covering them for all these years. Ritchie called it a 9/11 day for the family. And until you've experienced that kind of loss of a close family member, you can't even begin to fathom the kind of grief that they experienced that day. And Steve, I know that you've lost people close to you. I've lost people close to me. Most everybody has. But the thing that I think that separates that kind of loss from what the Petty family experienced back in May of 2000, we didn't have to deal with our grief in the public eye. We didn't have to face any reporters or attempt to express the emotions that we were experiencing. I don't know about you, Steve. I don't know that you were at Dover that next week or a couple of weeks later after Adam's accident, but Kyle did a press conference at Dover, his first race back, and it was actually painful to be in the room that day. Personally, I would have rather him been anywhere else in the world rather than in front of the media that day.
Well, losing a member of the family in racing is a very, very, very hard thing for any family to take. There's no doubt about that. Even though they know that it comes with the territory, there's always a possibility of that happening. I think you're right, though, to face the press, to face the media, because you are a celebrity type figure like Kyle is, that's got to be equally tough to handle. But Kyle, Richard, they knew that this came with the territory as well. There can be a lot of glory, and let's face it, a lot of profit in being successful at racing. But there is a dark side as well. and you have to face up to that side if it ever happens.
I think certainly that is the price of being in the public eye in general, and Petty in the public eye in particular. And of course, Adam was considered the future of Petty Enterprises, but another aspect that I had never considered before was that Maurice Petty and Associates were providing the engines for the Petty Enterprises truck team. Things were back in full swing with Dodge, and a lot of the fences that had been damaged in the mid-1980s for one reason or another, they were well on the way to being mended. Now, Maurice Petty and Associates and Petty Enterprises, they were two completely separate entities, but I believe that Adam's accident also took a toll on what Maurice Petty and Associates was doing.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, listen, it's family, okay? It's the same blood. They're all unified as a family. And something like Adam's death strikes every member of the family, no matter what they're doing.
Maurice Petty and Associates, they did keep plugging away with the engine shop, and they were actually doing pretty well with it. They were doing truck and late model engines and serving as a distributor for Dodge parts, but then things started drying up for whatever reasons, and Mark left to go to work for Bill Davis Racing. Timmy went to Richard Childress Racing. Ritchie was still helping his dad, and they were still doing engines for people, but more as a side gig rather than as a full-time operation. And now Timmy works full-time for ECR Engines there at the Richard Childress Racing Complex in Welcome. He also has the Moonshine Speed Shop there on the side. It's actually operated out of the Maurice Petty and Associates shop there. And if you need a car restored, if you need an engine restored or done, he's the guy to do it for you.
Absolutely. And I like that name, Moonshine Speed Shop. Sounds real appropriate to me, doesn't it?
I thought that might get your attention. Mark works at the shop for Petty's Garage, the museum, Richard, basically doing anything that needs to be done. And Ritchie is now working with their YouTube channel, Petty Brothers Racing. And like we said last week, if you've enjoyed this interview, you definitely need to go check out that channel because they pick up right where we left off.
I have seen episodes up there on that YouTube channel. That's good stuff, and you'll like it.
He also collects and curates a lot of the items that they inherited from their grandfather, grandmother, father, and mother. He is the family historian. He is the one who curates all that stuff. And Steve, like I said in the first installment of our interview with Mark and Ritchie and Timmy, the collection that they have in their shop. Now, it's not open to the public, but the collection that they have there at their shop is pretty doggone special, too.
Well, I know you've seen it, Rick, and I hope I get an invitation someday from the Petty boys to go see it myself. I really would love that.
Here is my takeaway from this interview. Ritchie and Mark and Timmy, they loved their daddy, and that love was returned. And the last thing that I want for anybody who's listening to this interview is for them to think only about what happened in 1983, 84, and 85, and any internal family squabbles, whatever they might have been over whatever issues. You listen to the Petty brothers, and in a very real way, they very firmly believe that it ultimately saved Maurice's life due to the stress that was eventually lifted off his shoulders. And because of that, they were able to go racing and into business together, which in turn allowed them to have a deeper and more meaningful relationship with Maurice.
Which turns out to be a very good thing because, Rick, as you well know, there are some families that go through the same kind of squabbles that the Pettys went through, as you already mentioned, and never recover from it. The family is pretty much shattered and splintered for the rest of the time. That's not the case here. They recovered nicely. Yes, it helped Maurice very much to be somewhat successful, and that allowed his sons to have a more meaningful relationship with him, as you said. It really could have gone wrong.
Richard was Maurice's big brother and protector when they were kids, and Maurice was dealing with the effects of polio. And as adults, Maurice was Richard's protector and would have taken a bullet for him. And as the Petty brothers said, Maurice would take Richard's side over them. Yeah.
And did more than once.
And I don't believe that ever changed, even after the rough seas of the mid-1980s. That's my takeaway.
And my takeaway as well, Rick.
Hey race fans, John Dodson here from NASCAR Technical Institute. NASCAR Tech is open and enrolling, with classes starting every 3 to 6 weeks. In our 48-week automotive technology program, students learn everything from vehicle electronic technology to diagnostics and drivability. And as our exclusive educational provider for NASCAR, we offer a 15-week NASCAR elective where students learn engines, fabrication, aerodynamics, pit crew essentials, and more. NASCAR Tech also offers 36-week welding and CNC machining training programs so you can choose the path that best fits your career goals. Ready to see how you can get started? Visit uti.edu/NASCAR today.
NASCAR Technical Institute prepares graduates to work as entry-level automotive service technicians. Some graduates who take NASCAR-specific electives also may have job opportunities in racing-related industries. NASCAR Tech is an educational institution and cannot guarantee employment or salary. This segment is brought to our listeners by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace. October 22nd, 1981 issue of Grand National Scene. The lead story in this issue was that Dale Earnhardt would be leaving Richard Childress at the end of the 1981 season to join Bud Moore. Steve, there's one paragraph in your story about all this that brought up all kinds of what-if scenarios. Now, this is what you wrote.
Oh, must be good then.
Earnhardt had the opportunity to drive for Harry Ranier's Hardee's team next season, replacing Bobby Allison. However, he opted to go with Wrangler, which wanted him to join an owner who earned his income from racing, thus eliminating the chance of sudden departure, much as was done by Rod Osterlund. Let's take a second to unpack the possibilities of Dale Earnhardt joining Harry Ranier. Can you imagine Dale Earnhardt driving cars with Waddell Wilson's power under his right foot? Dale in the 28 car. He's got at least a Daytona 500 win or two by the mid-1980s. And I'm thinking that he adds at least one more championship.
Oh, well, given Waddell Wilson's engines, and let's face it, Harry Ranier was a top-notch team owner at that time. So I think the potential for Dale to do all the things that you just mentioned was certainly there. And I think, no doubt, he was tempted by it. However,
because Wrangler wanted Dale to go with a team owner who was a team owner only, who made his living from NASCAR and NASCAR only, Dale went with Bud Moore and kind of struggled for a couple of years. Then he went back to RCR, where they weren't quite at the top of their game for the first year or two that Dale was back with them.
you can't blame Wrangler for thinking that way. They got seriously burned as a sponsor when Rod Osterlund backed out and sold to J.D. Stacy. And, you know, they hooked up with Richard Childress for the remainder of that year. And after that was done, certainly Wrangler was thinking about, look, we want to go somewhere where we can stay for a while. And that means we want to look for a guy who makes his living from racing and isn't about to turn his back on us like Osterlund did or was forced to do.
I think there are a couple of things that stick out to me about this scenario. Number one, going with Harry Ranier, I think, at least from the outside looking in, offered the best opportunity for immediate success.
True.
Dale did win races with Bud Moore, and he did win races early on with Richard Childress, but there were also a lot of mechanical failures, engine failures in particular.
That was the biggest bugaboo by all means.
I mean, it took a lot for an engine to stand up to Dale's right foot. But Waddell Wilson had been building engines for a long time, and he knew what it took.
Right.
And I believe that from the outset, Harry Ranier would have been a very good option for Dale at that time. And certainly, obviously, Dale went on to have, halfway decent success over the rest of his career. But it took some time to get up to that level.
Right. But at the same token, Wrangler didn't go anywhere. Okay? They were not forced out by a team owner's decision to sell or anything of that nature. I really think that Wrangler was very afraid of that situation.
The other thing that I think is interesting is that they wanted to go with a team owner who was a NASCAR person, who was a racing person only, and not have any outside business interests. Today, we know that that's probably the other way around. That's reversed 180 degrees. Sponsors want that outside business interest, marketing expertise, advertising, and so forth. And the racers, they get sponsorships when and where they can, but it's the overall business that matters.
Well, I agree with you 100%, but the situation then is not the situation it is now. Back then, you had more sponsors looking to sponsor a team for the entire season. Now, the money it would take to do that makes team owners go out and look for multiple sponsors. That's where your marketing and your PR and your support of that particular sponsor comes in handy, because that's a selling point to get them on board.
At the time, Harry Ranier's team was on it. Kel Yarborough wound up winning the 1983 and 84 Daytona 500s, driving for Harry and Waddell. And of course, we know the odyssey that it became for Dale to win a Daytona 500.
Yeah.
So again, I think that he wins a Daytona 500 much earlier, but
here comes the real crux.
But the flip side of this coin is that Kel only ran partial schedules for Harry between 1983 and 1986. And I am highly doubtful that Dale would have been on board with that.
Nor would have Wrangler. Wrangler would not want to spend a season's worth of money on a team that was not going to run the full season and give the driver a chance to win the championship.
Steve, I'm going to have to say that it all worked out the way that it was supposed to.
Hindsight, huh? 2020.
Dale was out hunting deer and was not available for comment for your story on him signing to drive for Bud Moore, but there was a Champions Notebook column supposedly authored by Dale Earnhardt in this issue. Underlined supposedly about 7 times. But he did say in that column that 2 dreams of a lifetime came true on that same weekend. You got to feel like things are going your way. I've always dreamed of driving for a well-established Grand National team, one that has a winning reputation and has been around for a long time. And Bud Moore certainly fit that bill. But then there's Dale's other dream. He was hunting when the announcement was made that he was going to drive for Bud Moore. But here is what happened on that hunt. Dale wrote, quote unquote, wrote, I pulled off a perfect shot, and just as I saw him go down, another young buck jumped out of the brush. I couldn't believe my eyes. He turned to give me another perfect shot, and I fired. He went down too. 2 clean hits on 2 beautiful bucks in a matter of seconds. I've hunted with guys who've gone years without a shot, and there they were, 2 of them. I know I'll never forget that moment, and I don't think the guys in my club will forget it either, when I walked out of the woods pulling 2 bucks behind me.
Well, that was a dream for Dale, but I'd be very honest with you, Rick. It's not mine. I never could really get into hunting of any kind.
So you're not going to go out and shoot Bambi's dad?
No, I'm not.
Well, I will say this. Can you imagine what Dale was saying to the other guys in that club? Can you imagine the bragging that was going on?
Oh, man. You talk about a puffed up chest.
According to your story, Richard Childress was talking to Warner Hodgson about sponsorship and to Bobby Allison and Benny Parsons about driving for his team. Now, we know none of that actually took place. Dell and Wrangler were eventually replaced by Ricky Rudd and Piedmont Airlines. Richard Childress said, I don't know what is going to happen, but I will admit that I'm looking for the best deal possible. I found out that you can't own a team, work on the car, drive it, and hope to be successful. That's the way I did it in the past, and I won't go back to that.
It should be noted that with Piedmont, Ricky Rudd won 2 races for Richard Childress and got him moving in the right direction. And I think it was very fortunate that he got the Piedmont sponsorship. Now, as an aside, I think I can let you know that R.J. Reynolds had a hand in this. R.J. Reynolds was a series sponsor, of course, and they're located in Winston-Salem. Piedmont Airlines at the time was a small but rich little airline. And guess what? They were headquartered in Winston-Salem as well, as was Richard Childress. Now, do you see the connections there?
I think that another interesting part of this statement here is that's the way that I did it in the past, and I won't go back to that. So when Richard Childress put Dale Earnhardt in his car midway through the 1981 season, that was the Rubicon.
Right.
He was not turning back from that.
And he never did. Never did.
I think it turned out well for him. Our friend David Ifft had been fired by MC Anderson. MC said, "It has been a disappointing season since we won the Firecracker 400 on July 4 at Daytona Beach. A change was necessary. I have one of the best drivers in NASCAR history. Cale Yarborough has done a tremendous job for us, but his car has never handled the way it should, especially in the second half of the season. Cale has not complained to me, not one time this season. He has had the opportunity, but he's a class gentleman. I think we here have done an injustice to Cale. Maybe I waited too long, but I did make the change today." David said, "There are no hard feelings. The man has been super to me. I have all the admiration in the world for him. I can't say anything but nice things about MC. The man has always laid it on the line. He told me today he wanted to make a change. He has been paying the bills all these years. When the boss man wants to make a change, you don't argue with him. I gave him 4 years of my life. Turn it around. He also gave me 4 years of his life. Man, he's a peach. All I can add is that I'm available for another job as of today."
Well, David was very gracious, but he was also very pragmatic about the whole situation. He was right. When you work with a guy that's that good to you, what do? You don't argue with him. You go out and try to find something else and leave on good terms.
With Bobby Allison leaving Harry Ranier's team, that left Harry looking for another driver. Bobby Allison did wind up joining Dygaard for the 1982 season. He won the Daytona 500 for him, with an asterisk, maybe with a bumper problem. We'll get into that one in another episode.
Stay tuned.
But at this point, late in 1981, nobody was saying anything. Jim Gardner, Dygaard's vice president, said, "Some discussions have taken place. Bobby has talked with my brother, but nothing has been resolved. To say that he would be with us in 1982 is very premature. Ricky Rudd had replaced Darrell Waltrip at Dygaard in 1981, and as far as Gary Nelson, the team manager at Dygaard, knew, it was going to stay that way. Gary said that Ricky will be back is what I get from the Gardners. And I know we haven't been courting Bobby. He came to us, so we've been listening. I'm confident that having Ricky with us is the way it will be."
Not quite.
Oh, no, it won't.
No.
Bobby Allison was asked about rumors that he had talked to the Gardners and J.D. Stacy and Richard Childress, to which Bobby responded, "You're not even near caught up with them all yet." So he'd talk to everybody.
Bobby was definitely looking.
Here is a rumor for you. Tim Richmond, driving a full schedule in 1982 for car owner Mike Laverne with factory backing from Ford. That's one part of the equation. But then David Pearson was said to be joining Tim as a teammate in 18 races or so. So there you have it. Tim Richmond and David Pearson, teammates. Old school, new school, somewhere in the middle, they meet.
Yeah, that might have been announced, but that situation would not end very well, Rick.
Tim did start 1982 with Laverne, but failed to qualify for the Daytona 500, and then made the 5th race of the season at Rockingham, but lasted only 112 laps before blowing the engine. And then, in May, Laverne was convicted of conspiring to embezzle bank funds, making false entries into bank records, and aiding and abetting a bank employee in misapplication of bank funds. Evidently, that's a no-no.
Well, I had a talk with Mike when all this was going on, and he was laying out all these outlandish plans they had for Tim and for David. And crew chief Harry Hyde was involved in the situation. I think he was hired to be the crew chief for Tim Richmond at that particular time. Mike told me so many wild stories about what they intended to do. I asked him point blank, where's the money coming from? Mike, you don't have a full-time sponsor. There's no sponsor on the side of your car. He said, so we'll make it. We'll make do. I know we can. Yeah, right. It did not end well.
Steve, that's another part of this that I did not know. Harry Hyde was actually a part of this deal. So
Sure.
Tim and Harry worked together as early as late 1981, early 1982,
That's correct.
before their paths met again at Hendrick Motorsports. And we know the kind of success that they had together then. I did not know that relationship had existed back before they worked together.
It did, and Harry at the time was really looking for some solid work, and he didn't find it there. It'd be a little bit of more time that Harry was not on the level that he wanted to be, and that didn't happen until you joined Hendrick.
You had a feature in this issue about Buddy Arrington being the only driver to still campaign Dodges at each and every stop on the Winston Cup Tour. There was still a Dodge Mirada or a Chrysler LeBaron floating around here and there with other teams and making spot appearances. But Buddy was all about some Dodges all the time. Buddy was, of course, hoping that Dodge might get back into the game. And he said, in a way, I'm sort of receiving vibrations that Chrysler might do something. It's been piddling around doing little things. I really think it tried to get Junior Johnson to do something. You remember he and Richard Petty tested Dodges at Daytona this year. Now, you know Junior didn't test a Dodge on his own. Maybe Chrysler would have done something for him, but I think it was a matter of money.
At that time, the real reason that Buddy was campaigning Dodges was, he was hoping that Chrysler would come back into racing full time and allow him to reap the benefits of that. But he was also a very close ally to the Pettys. And for years, the Pettys raced Dodges, and they sold or gave a lot of that equipment to Buddy so that he could campaign his Dodges. I think Buddy was still feeding off that line to the Petty and to Dodge at the time.
And all Buddy had to do to get it was stop 7 or 8 times on the racetrack and bring out cautions that Richard.
No, it was just one time.
Wait, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
Just one time.
Sure, it was just one time. Here is what would have been the perfect scenario for Buddy, and it is exactly the route that Richard Childress was going. It might be that Dodge would come up with enough money and help to allow me to not only run the full schedule next year, but carry it on into the future with another driver if I decided to quit. That would have been the perfect home run scenario for Buddy Arrington. But as we know, that's not the way it worked out.
No, exactly not. At that particular time, Chrysler did not come back into racing full time like he wanted. Now, there's a difference. He didn't come back like he wanted and be a part of the Chrysler program. That did not happen. So as a result, Buddy had to go on racing as long as he could until he finally did in the last couple of seasons of his career, switched to Ford.
I think Richard Childress made the right decision at the right time, and he played his cards perfectly.
And unlike Buddy, he had the full-time sponsor that was committed to him and to Dale.
There was news that ESPN would televise the upcoming Atlanta race from start to finish live. I thought Rockingham earlier in the spring was ESPN's first race. So I checked with the best NASCAR on TV expert that I know of, my friend Jay Coker. And according to Jay, the spring Rockingham race that year was ESPN's first broadcast, but it was tape delayed and edited to fit ESPN's broadcast window.
Right, just like a lot of the broadcasts of races on Wide World of Sports. That's how they were done.
Jay also added another little bit of an asterisk. Home Entertainment Network showed that summer's race from Nashville and used ESPN graphics with Bob Jenkins and Larry Newber in the booth and Eli Gold as a pit reporter. But Atlanta was ESPN's first live flag-to-flag broadcast.
You know, I'd almost forgotten that.
Bobby Batson, who was Atlanta's vice president of communications, said, to our knowledge, it's the first time we've had a race televised live from start to finish. And according to ESPN, it will be the first time they've ever done it too. I would hope that the racetrack would know whether or not they've had a race televised.
I would agree with you. But this inaugural live broadcast by ESPN really led us some good things in the future.
Timmy, Mark, and Ritchie Petty talked about how racing impacted their dad, Maurice's health. And you had another story in this issue on Maurice's health and him showing up at Charlotte's fall race, his first time back at a track since April of that year. Now, the way that racing works, you're either out of sight and out of mind, or you're out of sight and in the rumor mill. And that was the case for Maurice. There was talk that he was in ill health, which turned out to be closest to the truth. There were rumors that he'd been cooped up in the hospital, that he'd badgered the crew and his brother to the point where they kept him home, and or he had lost his mechanical talents and was basically being eased off the team.
So all these rumors is the reason I talked to Maurice. I wanted to hear the truth.
When you asked Maurice how he was doing, he responded, "Hey, I'm all right. Why shouldn't I be? How are you doing?"
I can see him to this day looking at me and saying that. Like, what are you thinking? What are you talking about?
Maurice said that he had chosen to stay home because his high blood pressure simply couldn't take the strain of being out on the road and working the kinds of hours that he was working. Maurice told you it would be Wednesday after a Sunday race before I would have my head back on. I wouldn't ever know what was going on Mondays or Tuesdays. I would be working in a daze, snapping at people and pushing myself beyond my limits. It was no way to get the job done. Steve, that is scary.
Absolutely.
It would be Wednesday after a Sunday race before I would have my head back about me.
Maurice did the right thing by staying away from the track.
Chief's responsibilities with the team remained the same, although his workload had been lightened. He concluded, "I don't see myself changing the way I've set up my jobs with the team. On Sundays now, I sit back and listen to the race on the radio. I like it. I relax and enjoy myself. Right now, there is no other way for me to do it. I don't care about the rumors. I care about myself and the team. But I will say one thing. After all these years, I just don't see how Richard can stand it. I don't see how he can take the strain and pressure year after year. I guess he's just in better physical shape than I am. But believe me, I'm happy."
Well, I don't know about how well Richard took the stress and the strain. You do recall that between the end of the 78 seasons and the start of Daytona in 79, ulcers forced Richard to have 40% of his stomach removed. Now, we all know that any number of things can cause ulcers, but doctors will tell you stress is a significant factor.
Well, you think about all the accidents that Richard had been in, and I was going to mention the ulcers and having part of his stomach removed. So if Richard had undergone all that and experienced all that and suffered from all that, if he was still in better health than Maurice was in pretty bad shape, evidently.
But Maurice did something about it, as he told us.
By my count, in this edition of Grand National Scene, which hit newsstands in your very first year as executive editor, you wrote the lead story on Dale Earnhardt joining Bud Moore, a story about silly season rumors concerning where Bobby Allison was going to land and the Tim Richmond David Pearson team, a column on Neil Bonnet, a feature on Buddy Arrington, and a feature on Maurice Petty. Steve, you were on it, man.
But I had to be. I mean, we did not have a big staff at Scene at the time. In fact, I think Gary McCrea and I were the only two guys who wrote full-time for Scene at the time. We used a lot of freelancers, such as Gene Granger and people like him. But, man, we were the only two. We had to dig hard.
You were firing away, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
However, Gary also wrote a story in this issue on young crew chief Kirk Shelmerdine, and it covered basically half a page over 4 columns, and the bottom of each of the first 3 columns appeared to have been somehow cut off. The copy does not flow correctly from the bottom of one column to the top of the next. So I just want to know, what did you do wrong?
Apparently, I just wrote too much and didn't pay attention to how it was all laid out.
Steve, honestly, how was the layout done back then? How was it printed out to be pasted onto the layout pages? Was there a computer at that time, or was it typeset?
We had one computer, one in the entire office. And to write on that computer and get the copy to come out, one person had to be on that computer. So Gary and I would switch times. In other words, when Gary was done with his story, he'd tell me he was done, and I'd go and write mine. And then when I was done, I would tell Gary, and he'd come back and finish up on his. All done with one IBM computer. And if you could see that computer today, you would say, man, that thing is a relic that belongs in the Smithsonian. No doubt about it.
Well, why didn't you just write it on your laptop and then use your thumb drive to put it into the computer that printed it out?
Excuse me, Rick, laptop? Run it into the computer and print it out, Rick?
Yeah. Why didn't you do it that way?
Back in those days, we would have no idea what the hell you were talking about.
I'm Ritchie Petty.
Hey, I'm Mark Petty.
Hey, I'm Richard Petty.
I'm Kyle Petty.
Hey, I'm Timmy Petty, and you're listening to the Scene Vault Podcast.
Hello, Scene Vault fans. This is Brian from Speedway Screens, and if you're enough of a NASCAR historian to be listening to this podcast, there's a good chance a piece of the past you've been on the hunt for is in my shop. I'm constantly on the hunt for apparel and collectibles from all genres and eras of motorsports, so whether it be cup cars, dirt modifieds, dragsters, or monster trucks, I've probably got something for you. Check out my inventory at speedwaytsj.etsy.com, and be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Speedway Screens for the newest items as soon as they drop, and for a peek at what I keep for my own collection. As a special thank you to listeners of this show, just enter SCENE at checkout for 10% off. speedwaytsj.etsy.com. That's speedwaytsj.etsy.com.
This podcast has been brought to our listeners by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace. And Steve, before we finish up this week, I want to say a couple of things. Number one, our listeners are well familiar with Sandy Estep and her relationship with me, and her son, Joe, my best friend, being the ones who got me into NASCAR. It's all their fault. Go ahead and say it. It's all their fault that I'm doing this right now. But I got a message from Sandy last night on Facebook, and she experienced a pretty severe fall at her home the other day. Sandy, I know you're listening to this. How about warning me the next time you send me photos of your injuries?
Squeamish, are you there, Rick?
Good. But seriously, Sandy, take care of yourself and do what the doctors tell you, do what Jennifer and Joe tell you, and you keep on kicking. All right. Well, I need you. I need your support. But then also, Steve, when I was at Scene, I was responsible for getting the photo bios together. And I really enjoyed doing that because it really introduced me to a lot of people in the garage. I would get their forms to them, and I would pester them until they got them back to me. And in all the time I did that for several years. And a lot of times the answers that people gave kind of tended to be the same. Yeah, what personality traits do you admire in a person? Honesty. Yeah. Right. What personality traits do you dislike in a person? Dishonesty.
Right.
Okay. All right. The greatest photo bio ever was from the legendary Steve Duzneski, or as his legions of fans and friends call him, Duz. Now, we'll get into the photo bio itself in next week's episode because you know what, Steve? I sat down with Duz.
Uh-oh.
At our studio. Holy cow.
Oh, I read that photo. Oh, dude, sounds like, what's his name from Fast Times at Richmond? Spicoli. That's it. Sean Penn.
Let's just say that Duz is one of a kind. Marches to the beat of his own drummer. 1 in a million, or whatever other cliche that you can come up with. And thanks to our buddy and longtime journalist, Rick Mentor, I was able to get Duz to sit down and got him in the studio for an interview. And in addition to being the very definition of an old school racer, Duz is also one holy heck of a musician. Now, he actually brought his guitar and played a bit right there in the studio, right there in the office section of the NASCAR Technical Institute. So just as a preview of our interview, here's Dues, and I hope you're in the mood for a little Jim Croce.
Like the pine tree lining the winding road, I got a name, I got a name. Like the was singing bird in a croaking tone, I've got a name, I've got a name. And I carry it with me like my daddy did, but I'm living a dream he never did. Moving on down the highway, moving on down the highway. Let's see, moving ahead so life won't pass me by.
So that's where we were going to be.
Don't you ever fuss about phone again.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
The sound, the
His did the
sound
same
guy,
thing a while ago.
the sound guy.
It's the spirits down here.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
It happens. Siri happens.
Dropped his mouse.
Let me get that for you.
But yeah, going back, we'd already